Dominic Ashford had everything a man could want. He had a company worth billions of dollars, a name that people respected, and a life that looked perfect from the outside. At 38 years old, he sat at the top of the business world. Newspapers wrote about him. Other businessmen looked up to him. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and everyone noticed. But on a cold Tuesday night, he sat alone at a long dining table meant for 12 people. The food in front of him was cold, the house was quiet, and the chair across from him, the one where his wife used to sit, was empty. It had been empty for 9 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. Not that he was counting. He was counting. 7 years before that quiet Tuesday night, Dominic met Naomi Voss at a charity event in the city. She was not a guest. She was a young architect hired by the event company to set up the venue. She was carrying equipment, giving directions to workers, and making sure every light and decoration was exactly right. Dominic walked into her path by accident and stood in the wrong spot. Naomi looked at him, not knowing who he was, and said politely but firmly, "Excuse me, sir. I need you to move. I have to finish this." He moved. Nobody had spoken to him like that in years. He liked it. He found her again before the night ended and asked for her phone number. She gave it to him, but only after she finished her job. That told him everything he needed to know about her. Naomi was the kind of woman who had built her life with her own hands. She grew up in a regular family in Ohio, won a scholarship to study architecture, and worked hard every single day to earn a good name in her field. She did not care about money or fame. She cared about doing good work and being treated with respect. She had no interest in being on anyone's arm like a decoration. That was exactly why Dominic fell in love with her. For the first time in his adult life, he had met someone who saw him as a regular person. Not a name, not a title, not a bank account. Naomi talked to him like he was just a man. And slowly, steadily, she became the most important person in his world. They got married 3 years after they met. It was the happiest Dominic had ever been. He was also the most afraid he had ever been, though he never said that out loud. Loving someone that much meant he could lose something, and losing things was not something Dominic knew how to accept. For the first 2 years of their marriage, life was good. They laughed together, they cooked together on Sunday mornings. Naomi decorated their home with care, and Dominic noticed every small detail she added. He learned how to slow down when he was with her. She learned how to dream even bigger because he believed in her. But in the 3rd year, trouble came to Dominic's company. A larger company tried to take over part of his business, and he went into full fighting mode. He worked from early in the morning until late at night. He skipped dinners. He forgot important dates. He stopped asking Naomi about her day. He was always somewhere else in his mind, even when he was sitting right beside her. Naomi was patient. She tried everything a good partner tries. She left kind notes for him in the morning. She planned weekend trips, only to cancel them herself when she saw how stressed he was. She sat beside him late at night when he could not sleep, not saying anything, just being there. She loved him deeply, and she showed it in quiet, steady ways. But Dominic had a problem he did not even know he had. His father had raised him to believe that strength meant control, that love meant making decisions for the people you cared about, that protecting someone meant keeping them close, keeping them safe, keeping them in a place where nothing could touch them, even if that place was smaller than where they wanted to be. So, without meaning to hurt her, Dominic started making decisions about Naomi's life without asking her. When a well-known design firm offered her a senior position that required some travel, he told her it was not the right time. He said it calmly, with a smile, and explained all the reasons it made sense to wait. She listened. She did not argue. She waited. When a friend invited Naomi to a design conference abroad, Dominic bought her a gift instead and suggested she stay home that weekend so they could spend time together. She stayed. He worked the entire weekend anyway. Little by little, the shape of Naomi's life grew smaller. She was still in the house. She was still kind. She still loved him, but something inside her was getting quieter, like a song being turned down one small notch at a time, until you could barely hear it. The final moment came on an ordinary Tuesday evening in March. Naomi came home with bright eyes and a wide smile, the kind of smile that does not happen every day. She had been offered the biggest project of her career, a beautiful cultural center in Lisbon, Portugal. She would lead the entire design team, It was everything she had studied for, worked for, and dreamed about since she was a young woman, sitting in a college classroom, with a pencil in her hand, and big plans in her heart. She sat across from Dominic at dinner, and told him about it. She spoke with so much joy that her hands moved while she talked. She described the building, the city, the team. Her eyes were shining. Dominic listened. Then he put down his fork, folded his hands and said, very calmly, I think this is the wrong time. We are in a sensitive season right now. Maybe in a year or two, something like this will come around again. He said it like it was a business decision, like it was settled, like her dream was a meeting that could be rescheduled. Naomi did not shout. She did not cry. She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her eyes changed, not with anger, but with a kind of sad clarity, the way a person looks when they finally understand something they had been hoping was not true. She said nothing that night. She went to bed. Dominic finished reading his papers and thought the conversation was over. The next morning, while he was in an early phone meeting, Naomi packed 2 suitcases. She moved carefully and quietly through the house she had decorated with her own taste and her own hands. She placed her house key on the kitchen counter. She picked up her bags and she walked out the front door. There was no argument, no dramatic scene, just the soft click of a door closing behind a woman who had made a decision. Dominic did not fall apart immediately. He was too trained for that. He went to work the next day. He closed a deal that week. He attended a business dinner and shook hands and smiled at the right moments. From the outside, nothing had changed. But on the inside, something was very wrong. He came home every night to a house that felt different. It was the same furniture, the same rooms, the same everything. But without Naomi, it was just a building. It was not a home anymore. His sister Claire was the first person to say out loud what no one else would say. She sat across from him in his study about 2 weeks after Naomi left and told him the truth without softening it. You did not lose her, Dominic, she said. You let her go. You made her smaller and smaller until there was no room left for her to breathe. And now you are surprised that she left. That is not bad luck. That is a result. Dominic had no answer. He sat there and listened, and for the first time in many years, he had nothing to say. He thought about Claire's words for 3 days. He thought about them in the car, at his desk, and at 2 in the morning when he could not sleep. And then he did something he had never done before in his adult life. He called a counselor and made an appointment. The next several months were not easy. Dominic sat in a quiet office every week and talked honestly about his life. He talked about his father, who had praised him when he succeeded, and gone silent when he showed softness. He talked about how he had carried that lesson into every part of his life, his company, his friendships, and his marriage. He talked about Naomi, about all the moments he had chosen control over kindness, about the project in Lisbon that he had dismissed with 1 sentence while she sat across from him glowing with hope. He learned things about himself that were uncomfortable to know. He learned that loving someone and controlling someone are not the same thing, even when the controlling comes from a place of care. He learned that loving who loves you can still leave if loving you costs them who they are. Meanwhile, Naomi had accepted the Lisbon project. She was living in a small apartment near the river in Portugal, working long days on something that belonged entirely to her. She was tired and busy, and sometimes lonely, but she was also more herself than she had been in years. She woke up in the morning, knowing that the choices of her day were her own. That feeling, she realized, was something she had quietly missed for a long time. 4 months after she left, a letter arrived at her apartment. It was from Dominic, handwritten, 7 pages long. He did not ask her to come back. He did not make promises or offer deals. He simply wrote the truth, that he understood what he had done, that he was sorry in a way that was real, and not just words, and that she deserved to know she had not been wrong to leave. Naomi read the letter twice. She set it on her table. She did not reply for 3 weeks. When she finally did, she wrote 2 sentences. I received your letter. I am not ready, and I do not know if I ever will be. Please respect that. He wrote back only, I will. 9 months after Naomi walked out of their home, Dominic flew to Lisbon. He did not call her first. He did not plan anything grand. He simply looked up the public presentation of her cultural center project, a large city event with hundreds of people, bought a regular ticket, and sat in the back row like any other member of the audience. He watched Naomi stand at the front of that room and speak about her work. She was calm, clear, and completely in command. She answered questions with confidence. She smiled at the right moments and was serious at the right moments. She was entirely herself. Dominic watched and felt something he could not fully name, a mixture of pride and sadness, and something that felt like respect so deep it almost hurt. She saw him during the reception afterward. They looked at each other across the room for a moment. Then she walked over. "You came," she said. "Yes," he said. "Why?" she asked. He thought for a moment, and then answered honestly. "Because I wanted to see you in a place where nobody had ever asked you to be less than you are." She looked at him for a long time. "Coffee," she said. "Tomorrow morning, 1 hour." He nodded. "I will be there." Coffee became a long walk. The walk, weeks later, became a phone call. The phone calls became regular. There was no rush. Naomi did not move quickly, and Dominic did not push. He followed her pace completely, not because he was playing a game, but because he had genuinely learned that her comfort mattered more than his impatience. Months passed. They talked honestly about things they had never talked about during their marriage, about what had gone wrong, about what they had each needed and never said clearly, about who they were becoming now that both of them had spent real time looking at themselves without looking away. One evening, Naomi told him she was willing to try again, but she also told him that trying again would look different from before. She had 4 things she needed from him, and they were not up for discussion. Her work would never again come second to his schedule. They would see a couples counselor together for at least 1 year. Every big decision about their shared life would be made together, or it would not be made at all. And if he ever fell back into old habits, even slightly, she would leave, and there would be no more conversations after that. Dominic agreed to every single condition. He did not negotiate. He did not add any buts or howevers. He simply said yes, and he meant it. What Dominic had not expected was that choosing Naomi would cost him in the business world too. When it became known that he had spent months in counseling, had moved part of his life to Portugal to be closer to his wife's work, and had handed over day-to-day control of 3 of his company divisions to his team, instead of managing everything himself, people in the business world started to talk. Some called it weakness, some called it distraction, and a rival businessman who had been waiting for exactly this kind of moment launched a move to take over one of Dominic's biggest business divisions. At the same time, 2 senior members of his own company board, men who had made a great deal of money working under the old version of Dominic, began quietly working to turn other investors against him. They wanted the old Dominic back, the one who worked without stopping, decided without asking, and never put anything above the business. Dominic faced a choice. He could go back to being that man. He could fight the way he used to fight, cold, hard, and completely focused on winning. He knew how to do it. Part of him even wanted to, because that part was still there. But he thought about what going back would mean. It would mean long nights away from Naomi again. It would mean making decisions from a place of fear. It would mean returning to the armor he had worn for so long that he had forgotten it was not his real skin. And it would mean breaking every promise he had made, not just to Naomi, but to himself. He chose to let the division go. He accepted the financial loss rather than fight a war that would pull him back into the person who had destroyed his marriage. The loss was large. The business press wrote about it as the biggest mistake of his career. He read one of those articles over breakfast in the Lisbon apartment he now shared with Naomi. He folded the newspaper, set it down, and asked her if she wanted to take a walk by the river. She said yes. They went. In the years that followed, Dominic's company became smaller, but it became more focused, more honest, and more his own. He hired a co-leader to share the work with him. He took real time off for the first time in 15 years. He learned, slowly and with effort, what it meant to be present in his own life rather than always fighting for the next thing. Naomi's career grew. Her Lisbon project was praised around the world. She opened her own architecture firm. Dominic attended her opening event and sat in the front row, not to be seen with her, but simply because he was proud, in the way that good and honest people are proud of someone they love. They did not have a second grand wedding. On a quiet morning, with just Dominic's sister and his closest friend as witnesses, they stood before a civil official and renewed the promises they had once made to each other, Naomi wore a simple dress she had found at a market near their apartment. There was no photographer, no press, no event. What happened that morning lived only in their memory, which was exactly where they wanted it. The marriage they built the second time was different from the first. There was no one person in charge. There were disagreements, because two people who care deeply about things will always find things to disagree about. But every disagreement ended with both of them trying to understand the other, rather than one of them trying to win. Dominic learned to say he was wrong, without adding any explanation after it. Naomi learned to ask directly for what she needed, rather than waiting quietly and hoping he would notice. They became, little by little, the kind of partners who made each other genuinely better. 5 years after Naomi had walked out with 2 suitcases and a key left on a kitchen counter, Dominic sat on the small terrace of their apartment in Lisbon. The street below smelled of bread and river water. The evening light was soft and golden on the rooftops. He sat and thought quietly about everything that had happened. He had lost a large amount of money. He had lost a reputation for being untouchable. He had lost control of 3 business divisions and a title that the financial world had given him. Some people thought he had fallen. But sitting on that terrace, he made his own honest list of what he had gained. He had a wife who came back to him not out of habit or obligation, but because she chose to, with clear eyes and full knowledge of who he was and what he was still learning to be. He had a sister who called him her favorite person for the first time in their adult lives. He had a version of himself that he could live with, and even like, when he sat quietly and thought about who he was. He had all of this because he had been willing, at the most important moment, to let go of what he thought made him powerful, and to hold on instead to what actually made his life worth living. Naomi came out onto the terrace with 2 cups of coffee. She sat down beside him, not across from him, not at a polite distance, but right beside him, the way people sit when they are comfortable and safe, and exactly where they want to be. He took his cup. She rested her head briefly on his shoulder. The river below caught the evening light and turned it golden. It was a small, quiet moment. Nothing about it would make the news. Nobody would write about it. But it was the truest and most valuable thing Dominic Ashford had ever had. And this time, he knew it.